Hey everybody, welcome into this Adobe Photoshop tutorial brought to you as always by tutvid.com. My name is Nathaniel Dodson, and today we're going to take a look at retouching eyes in Photoshop using this one technique that I think is probably the best technique, or at least it's up there. I think it's one of the best techniques. And using this technique, you can make your eyes as subtle and realistic as you like, or as fantastical and crazy as you like. And just a few opacity sliders, you control exactly how the eyes on your subject look. Now, if you're new around here, make sure you subscribe to the channel so you never miss any new video tutorials that come out here. And also consider leaving a comment down below and timestamp a part of the video that you really liked or found particularly useful. Maybe there was a little tidbit or a tip in there that you liked. That kind of stuff just helps me create better video tutorials and target stuff that you guys like even more in the future. So let's go ahead and get this thing started. Okay, here we are in Photoshop, and the basic premise behind what I like to do is, number one, zoom in on the eyes. I like to target the whites of the eyes, clean up the veins a little bit, and then I like to do all of my shadow work and then my highlight work, and then, tone things back and make it look good. Find the sweet spot of where all the adjustment layers fit together and make the eyes look just perfect. Now, I am starting with a professionally shot photo in studio. There are already some catch lights in her eyes. This is a technique that it works on nicer photos, preferably a photo shot in studio or a photo where you have good catch lights or good light in the eyes. If you have very dark eyes and they're shadowy and there's not really any light getting into the eyes, you're going to have a difficult time making those eyes look good kind of no matter what. So you do want to begin with a decent photo. That being said, let's get this thing started. I am going to create a new layer, and I'm going to name the layer Blemishes, and then I'm going to grab my healing brush tool, not the spot healing brush, but rather the regular old healing brush, and I like to use it set to the blend mode light, and for something like this, I'm getting rid of dark lines over a light background. So this is going to work really well for us. I have the diffusion set to 7, which is going to give me a lot of blur around the edges of my healing brush, and I'm going to go in here and begin painting away. Now, I need to hold down the Alt or Option key, and that's going to allow me to sample. So I'm going to sample a lighter area of the eye, and then I'm going to go in and just begin painting away the redness here in her eye. And there we have it, all of the lines gone. Now, if we zoom out, we may see some stuff like it looks kind of like the inner part of the eye. It gets kind of darker right there, right? And there's a dark line kind of coming out where a vein was. How do we blend that a little bit better? Well, for something like this, the healing brush does a little bit too much healiness. It does too much. It tries to blend too much. So I'm going to switch over to my trusty clone stamp. I'm going to, again, set this to the light and blend mode, and I'll reduce the opacity to somewhere between 30 and 40. I'm sampling from current and below, which means that I'm working up on a blank layer, but it's still able to sample the background layer. By the way, I was working that way with the healing brush. I probably should have mentioned that. Current and below. It's a great way to work with these tools. And what I want to do is have a relatively large brush, kind of like this, and I'll just sample out here in sort of the clean part of the eye and just gently paint over that transition area to help sort of blend it together a little bit. Now, part of what this is doing is it's softening the entire part of the eye, making it almost look a little blurry. And we have that happening over here as well. Part of that is the clone stamp that I just did. Part of that is I like to work at a high diffusion so I get a little bit more blur. You don't have to work at 7 diffusion. You can crank that down. You get a little less blur, but it won't blend quite as much. The way that we fix this or help correct it is add a little bit of noise to help match the noise level in the other parts of the eye. See, this whole area looks just too soft. So I'm going to go Filter, Noise, Add Noise, and this has to be pretty subtle. It can't be too much, can't be too little. Amount about 1.5. That actually looks pretty decent. I think I'm going to say okay for that and let that roll. And if it still looks like it's a little too much, maybe it's a little too much in there, we can always go edit, fade the add noise, and just pull back on the opacity of that a little bit until it blends just right and hit OK. That'll just help get rid of some of that blurry feeling. And now that we've added the noise, one more way to further blend it into the eye is double click here on the layer out away from the name or thumbnail. This is going to open our layer styles dialog box. We want to work with the blend if sliders here and particularly use the this layer slider, the white one. Hold down Alt or Option and split the white slider and drag it over kind of toward the center just before you start to see the veins again. So something kind of like that. It's just going to help blend a little bit more and allow some of the original color of the eye to come through and just help make it look a little more realistic. Now we want to desaturate the whites of the eyes a little bit more. You can take the whites all the way to a pure white, but that's not too super realistic. Then again, what we're doing, you could argue, is not realistic at all. I'm going to add a vibrance adjustment layer here, collapse my adjustments panel, double click on vibrance to open it up, and knock the vibrance down to -100. You can see really sucks a lot of the life out of the image. Select the vibrance layer mask right there. See, it's highlighted with the white marks, and hit Command or Control I to flip the color, fill it with black, right? The opposite of white is black, so invert, Command or Control I is going to just flip the white to a solid black. Then we're going to grab our brush tool here, and I'm going to set the opacity of the brush tool to 50%, maybe a little bit less. Maybe let's go 40, 45%. And then I'm going to paint with white over the whites of the eyes. So we're just removing some of that color in there. So again, just go over this, paint over one pass. It doesn't have to be perfect. And there you go. Something like that will just remove some of that red and yellowness that you tend to see in people's eyes. Now, if I zoom way in on the eye, you can see here on the iris, we have a couple like mineral spot looking things. You might want to keep those as just cool natural color. Some cameras are high resolution enough and have enough clarity with the full frame goodness that you can see things like the edges of contact lenses and little specks of dust or things that may have landed on the surface of somebody's eyes. So I'm going to go ahead and just get rid of them. I'm going to use my healing brush once more, blend mode set to lighten, and again, I'm working current and below. I'm back on the blemishes layer. Hold down Alt or Option. Now I'm going to use lighten over here, and I'm going to get rid of, well, I can't do that, I'm sorry. I'm going to use lighten here with the darker spots, and once I get rid of them, I'm going to go and set my blend mode to darken for the lighter spot, just like so. There you go. You can quickly get rid of those spots. You don't have to. I just found them a little annoying, so I wanted to get rid of them. Now let's select our vibrance adjustment layer, and I'm going to add 2 curves adjustment layers. 1, 2. I'm going to collapse my adjustments panel again. I'm going to double click and I'm going to name my top curves layer Dodge. This is going to be for brightening stuff. And the bottom one I'm going to name Burn, which is going to be for darkening stuff. With the burn layer selected, I'm going to set it to a blend mode of color burn, not linear burn, color burn. And then again, we'll select that layer mask, Command or Control I to flip it from white to black. Select the Dodge curves layer, and this one we're going to say, hey, we want color Dodge. And again, select that layer mask, Command or Control I to flip it from white to black. Okay, I like to begin working with the burn first. I like to work with the shadowy bits of the eye first. So here on the burn curves layer, we have that layer mask selected. I'm going to grab my ellipse tool here. I'm going to hold down Shift, and I'm going to drag out a perfect circle. I'm going to try to make my selection kind of ride right along with the edge of the eye. Now, I'm holding on the spacebar key there while I was dragging it out so I could move it as I dragged. And once you have it in place, you can use your arrow keys to nudge it exactly where you think it needs to go. So I can zoom in here, say, you know, maybe it needs to bump to the right 1 pixel. Something like that's good. Now, we're not finished because we've selected here the eyelid and lash and everything. So with this tool still selected, I'm going to hold down Shift and Option. That's Shift and Alt on the PC. See the little X that appears next to my cursor? And I'm going to drag a big selection up, and I want to ride along the top of her eyelid, just there. And you can see it cuts away everything that wasn't selected. So let me do that again. Holding down Shift and Option, that's Shift and Alt, drag a selection over your entire circle, but I'm following like the bottom of the eyelid right there, just like that. And then down here you can see we're selecting just a little bit of the bottom eyelid. So I will do the same thing from the top, pull down a selection over the top of my eye, and just trim that stuff away at the bottom. It doesn't have to be perfect, it just kind of has to be close. And now that we have this, we can grab our brush tool, and I'm going to set the opacity of it to 100%. It's going to be overkill, and we're going to make the brush a little bit bigger. So I'm going to right click, and I'm going to bump the size up to, I don't know, like 80 pixels. Maybe 80 is too big. Let's try maybe 40-ish, somewhere around 40. Yeah, I think 40 will work. And I'm going to simply paint around the edges of my selection. Again, if I right click, I have my brush here set to a 0% hardness. So it's a 0% hardness, so very soft edge brush. I have my little center point on my brush tip, and I'm going to keep that just outside of my selection. So I'm just going to go and paint over this, adding shadow in where I think shadow needs to be, and then of course across the top. And then you can go back in and just very gently fill in areas you think need to be filled in. And I emphasize be very, very careful here because you can really start to make the shadow around the eye look really, really bad by adding way too much shadow in one area or not enough in another. While I have my big brush, I actually might make it a little bit bigger here. I'm using my square bracket keys. I want this to be about the size of the iris. I'm going to click maybe once, twice, 3, 4 times to add some darkness to the pupil in the very center of the eye. Now hit Command or Control D to deselect. Looks pretty bad, right? But here's what we're going to do. We're going to go Filter, And I'm going to say, hey, blur this. I'm blurring the entire layer mask, Gaussian blur, and we'll blur this about 5 pixels. I'm going to hit OK. And you can see we just get this nice dusty edge all around the edges here of the iris. Now that I've done that, I'm going to zoom out just a little bit. I'm going to grab my brush tool again. I'm going to make it a little bit smaller, again, using my square bracket keys right next to the letter P on your keyboard. And I'm going to reduce the opacity of this brush to somewhere around at a 40 or 50%, maybe 40%. And I'm going to darken up around her eyes. 40% is way too much. Let's knock this down to like 15 to 20%. I'm going to add a little darkness here to the bottom of the upper eyelid. And you could even go so far as to darken up the entire eyebrow if you wanted. I don't know that I'm going to quite do that much there. And you could darken up the makeup around the eye and stuff like that. I'm not going to get into all that here. I'm just going to add a little darkness to the inner part of the eyelid. And I think we're good to go when it comes to that. The one thing I will do is zoom in a little bit on the eye. And I'm going to paint black over the catch light. The catch light is the reflection of the actual light used to take her photo or to light the photo here. I'm still working in that curve layer mask. And the reason I'm going to paint with black, I'm going to hit the little flippy flop arrows here. I'm painting with black. The reason I'm going to paint with black is, and I'm going to set my brush back to 100. Maybe I can finish a train of thought here. The reason I'm going to paint with black is because I want to get rid of all the black that was painted over that beautiful catch light when we added all the black to the center pupil to really darken things up in there. So that is going to make things really, really nice for us. I'm not going to worry about reducing opacity quite yet. Let's take a look at working with the highlights now, and then we'll reduce opacity and make everything look good. So let's select our dodge layer. Again, make sure we've selected the layer mask. Now in here, we want to take a little bit of a different approach. Let's zoom in a little bit more. And I want to make my brush very, very small. So I'm going to pop down my menu here, and I'm going to say, give me a 1 pixel brush with 0 hardness. And I am going to paint a little bit over just this little bit of liquid, tear, whatever it is here at the bottom of the eye. I'm going to flippy flop my arrow so I'm painting with white. Opacity 100%. And I'm just going to add a little bit of brightness there. Don't worry if your line is a little squiggly like mine. I'm also going to go in and paint along, almost if you imagine the ridges of color around the iris. So I'm going to begin painting in just kind of like this. You can see I'm sort of following the curvature of the iris. I'm just going to paint around and around and around like this to add brightness here, specifically to the bottom part of the eye. That's the part I'm most concerned with. And you don't need to be too exact. You just kind of need to be close enough because we're going to add a little bit of a blur to this in a moment. I'm mainly concerned with adding a lightness to the bottom part of the eye that sits directly opposite the catch light. So over here, I'm most concerned with getting the most light right over here. And you can see we have a little catch light here from a reflector that was underneath her chin. So that's nice. That's going to work out well. I'm going to make my brush a little bit bigger, and I'm going to paint over the entire catch light up here just to give that some sting. And now before I do anything else, I'm going to blur this entire mask, again using a Gaussian blur filter. We're going to go blur, Gaussian blur, and not 5 pixels, we're going to blur this 1 pixel. We used a tiny brush, so you can see it makes a difference. There's before, there's after. Now, we don't have enough of a difference yet. There's a little bit of blue in the light. We could use a hue saturation adjustment layer to suck that out and make it just a perfect white. Maybe we will before the end of this. I want to create a brand new layer, and I'm going to call this layer Sting, or Stings, or something like that. If I can spell it, I threw a J in there just because J's are fun. So I've got Sting, and I'm going to set this layer to the blend mode Overlay. What I'm going to do here is, again, reduce my brush to 1 pixel in size. I'm painting at 100% opacity, just like before. And I want to just paint some additional brightness. I'm just painting with the color white. I want to paint some sting, if you will, down here into this area of the eye that should be brighter. Now, over here, it shouldn't be quite so bright, so I'm just going to paint a little bit. But right here should have the most sort of brightness. And then, of course, this whole area here, that should be our reflector. That should have some kick to it as well in the bottom part of her eye. So something just like that works. You can also come into the whites of the eyes and you can paint a little bit of brightness in there if you like. Something kind of like that. Because now with the stings, we're going to go ahead. We're going to go filter, blur, Gaussian blur, just like before. Let's see what 1 pixel does for us. That's not bad. I kind of think we need 2 pixels. Something sort of like that will work for us. We can hit OK. Maybe out here still needs a little bit more. Let's try 3 pixels. 3 pixels I think will work. Hit OK. And you can see there's before the stings and there's after we added the light sting. Now, just because the blue in this catch light's bothering me, let's go ahead and add, I said hue saturation. Maybe we'll just add another vibrance adjustment layer because we've already worked with one of them. Just reduce the saturation to -100. and I will select the, you know what, we probably don't even need to do that. Let's just select our original vibrance layer. Why not, right? And I'm going to go ahead and just paint with my brush at 100% opacity. Let's paint with white. It's not going to take all the blue out, but it's going to take most of it, enough that it's not going to bug us, and it's just going to look like a nice, perfectly crystally chrome light. Now, as we zoom out, let's just undo what we did. I'm holding down my Alt or Option key, and I'm going to click on the eyeball for the background layer. There's the eye before, here's the eye after. Now, I know what you're thinking. That's really, really strong, and it is. Here's where you have total control over this effect. You can begin taking the dodge and burn and the sting layer and just reduce the opacity. I typically like to take it down to like 40–50%. Now, it all depends on the photo, but I found 40–50% works pretty well for most things. Now, one other really important note here that I should leave you with is that overdoing the highlights, the dodge layer and the sting layer, they are what are going to make your eyes look really, really fake, or like they're sparkling just too much. Something's not quite right with them. See here, if I go preview, there's before, there's after. We clean the eye up nicely. We add some contrast, depth, and color to the eye, and it looks really, really nice. So there you have it. That is how we go ahead and fully retouch an eye to bring out detail, light, contrast, depth, color, everything right here in Photoshop. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. That is how you retouch eyes in Photoshop. That's at least how I retouch eyes in Photoshop. A couple adjustment layers, maybe a blemish layer and another layer, a couple things like that, a few layer masks, a brush here and there, and hey, you got it. It's all done. So there is how you do it. For this one, ladies and gentlemen, that's it. Get it? Got it? Good. Nathaniel Dodson, tutvid.com. I'll catch you in the next one. And before you go, make sure you subscribe to my channel for more great tutorials every day. Also, buy my course. It helps us do what we do, and this channel is supported by viewers just like you. You can also just click the thumbnail and watch another video from this channel. See you next time, guys.